When you imagine a medieval knight, you probably see shining armor, heroic charges, and banners snapping in the wind. Honor, glory, legend. But that isn't how knighthood really began. It began with a 7-year-old boy leaving home, with bruises, with exhaustion, with years of training before he was ever allowed near a battlefield. Before the armor, before the sword, before the glory, there was conditioning. Running until your lungs burned, wrestling in the dirt, learning to obey without hesitation, mounting a half-ton war horse while wrapped in steel. This wasn't a hobby. It wasn't a phase. It was a system designed to reshape your body, discipline your mind, and define your place in medieval society. Many started the journey. Not all of them finished it. Here's the first big myth to bust. Knights didn't start training as adults. Most began around age 7. At that age, a noble boy became a page, leaving home, preparing to become a knight. Daily training for a page included riding horses without falling off, important skill, running, jumping, wrestling, carrying heavy objects, learning etiquette, religion, and loyalty. This wasn't optional exercise, it was conditioning. They were building balance, coordination, and stamina long before touching real weapons. Can you imagine your PE class being basically training for battlefield survival? Around age 14, a page graduated to squire, and this is where daily training shifted into overdrive. Their days were packed. Physical training, wrestling and grappling, very practical for armored combat. Running obstacle courses, practicing balance while carrying weapons, lifting stones or weighted shields. This wasn't about looking muscular. It was about endurance, explosive strength, and not panicking when exhausted. Scholars agree that medieval combat was brutally physical, often decided in minutes by whoever got tired first. Squires trained with wooden swords and spears, quintains, spinning targets that hit you back if you messed up, shields, daggers, and polearms. And yes, they practiced every day. Not for hours at once, but in frequent, intense sessions. Here's another movie myth. Knights weren't just fighters, they were elite cavalry athletes. Daily training almost always included horsemanship. Knights practiced mounting in full armor, controlling a horse using knees alone, fighting with sword or lance while riding, charging in formation. War horses weren't passive vehicles, they were trained animals weighing half a ton. Managing one required constant practice. And here's something wild. A knight who fell off his horse in battle was in serious danger, even if uninjured. So staying mounted was a life-or-death skill. Can you imagine learning combat on top of a living, panicking animal while wearing 50 pounds of steel? That takes daily repetition. Let's talk about armor. Contrary to popular belief, knights could move, run, and fight effectively in armor because they trained in it. Not constantly, that would be exhausting and expensive, but often enough that it became familiar. They practiced, walking and running in armor, mounting horses, falling safely, fighting while restricted. Modern experiments show that plate armor distributes weight surprisingly well, but it still taxes your cardiovascular system. Studies comparing armored movement to modern athletics suggest it's closer to high-intensity interval training than slow plodding. Translation: knights were shockingly fit by pre-modern standards. This level of training also came with a cost. Joint damage, chronic pain, and injuries were common later in life. Health and glory didn't always age gracefully together. When knights weren't at war, they trained through tournaments. Now, tournaments weren't just jousting. Early on, they were chaotic mock battles called melees, involving dozens or hundreds of fighters. Daily preparation for tournaments included sparring, conditioning, equipment maintenance, tactical drills. Tournaments served 3 purposes: skill development, social status, Income, ransom and prizes were real money. But here's the twist. Tournaments were dangerous. Knights were injured or killed, even during practice. So, yes, this was training, but training with real consequences. Knightly training wasn't only physical. They were taught emotional control under stress, obedience to command religious discipline, a specific code of honor, which varied by time and place. Chivalry wasn't just about being polite, it was about predictable behavior in violence. Did knights always live up to it? Absolutely not. Medieval sources complain about knightly brutality constantly. But the ideal mattered, and training reinforced it through ritual, prayer, and repetition. This mental conditioning helped knights function in terrifying situations, but also reinforced rigid social hierarchies. Training shaped not just bodies, here's a movie but trope medieval that needs society itself, the lone knight winning battles single-handedly. Real knights trained to fight as units, because charging alone was a fast way to get surrounded and killed. So how did medieval warriors practice coordinated cavalry charges without radios, hand signals, or modern communication? The answer: repetition, discipline, and a lot of horses crashing into each other during practice. Knights trained in formation riding almost daily. This meant maintaining spacing while galloping. Too close equals collision, too far equals broken line, timing the charge to hit simultaneously, recognizing visual signals, banners, trumpet calls, the Lord's position, wheeling and reforming after contact. This wasn't instinct, this was drilled behavior. A successful cavalry charge required dozens of armored men on half-ton animals to move as one cohesive wall of steel and momentum. And here's what makes it harder. Each knight had different levels of experience, different horses, different equipment quality. Training evened that out, or tried to. Knights also practiced coordinated infantry support, because contrary to myth, knights didn't fight in isolation. They worked alongside foot soldiers, archers, and men-at-arms. Daily drills included holding formation while infantry advanced, protecting flanks during archer volleys, coordinated retreats, harder than it sounds, fighting in tight ranks when dismounted. Medieval battle accounts describe formations collapsing because one knight broke discipline. So, training emphasized obedience to command over individual heroics. Can you imagine suppressing your survival instincts to hold a line while arrows fall and horses scream? That takes conditioning. And here's the brutal truth. Knights who trained alone might be skilled duelists, but in actual battle, they were liabilities. Victory went to the disciplined unit, not the flashy individual. The economic reality. Now let's talk about something movies conveniently ignore: the cost. Becoming a knight wasn't just hard, it was expensive. Shockingly, bankruptingly expensive. So, who could actually afford this lifestyle, and what did it take to maintain it? Let's start with the basics. A full suit of plate armor in the 15th century cost roughly what a skilled craftsman earned in 10 to 15 years. We're talking 100 to 200 florins for a full harness, equivalent to modern luxury car prices, 20 to 40 florins for a war horse. Another car, 5 to 10 florins per year in equipment maintenance, plus weapons, training gear, servants, and lodging. And that's just the knight himself. Training required a lord or sponsor willing to host you for years, skilled masters-at-arms who didn't work for free, practice weapons that broke and needed replacing, horses that got injured or died, medical treatment for inevitable injuries. One estimate suggests maintaining a single knight in training cost a noble household 50 to 100 florins annually. For over a decade, can you imagine your parents spending the equivalent of a house just so you could maybe become a professional fighter? Here's the reality. Most knights came from wealthy families or were sponsored by lords who expected loyalty and military service in return. This created a cycle. Only the rich could afford knighthood, which kept them rich and powerful, which kept everyone else out. By the 14th century, many eligible nobles simply refused knighthood. Why? The costs outweighed the benefits. Tournaments became pay-to-play events. You needed entry fees, travel expenses, backup equipment in case yours broke, ransom money in case you lost. Some knights went into debt financing their tournament careers, gambling that prize money and ransoms would pay off. Sometimes it did. Often it didn't. And here's the part that killed knighthood as an institution. Technology got cheaper and more effective. By the 1500s, firearms required weeks of training, not decades. Pike formations could stop cavalry charges. Professional infantry cost a fraction of maintaining knights. Centralized armies replaced feudal levies. Suddenly, investing 15 years and a fortune into one armored warrior made zero economic sense. Knighthood survived as a title and social honor, but as a practical military role, it priced itself out of existence. So when you see a knight in full plate armor on screen, remember, you're looking at the medieval equivalent of a Formula One race car. Powerful, prestigious, extremely expensive, and ultimately replaced by cheaper, more practical alternatives. So how did knights train every day? Not with endless duels and dramatic speeches, but with lifelong conditioning, constant repetition, grueling physical effort, and very little margin for error. They were athletes, soldiers, and symbols all rolled into one. The biggest myth isn't that knights were invincible, it's that their skill came naturally. It didn't.